Thomas Wellington chuckled dismissively as he saw his housekeeper on the phone. "You don't even know where you're working." Sarah stared at him with absolute authority. "Shut up, don't say a word." What she said next froze his smile forever. "Before we start today's story, tell us where you're watching from. Grab a coffee or get comfortable on the couch, and please don't forget to support us. Just hit like, and I'll know you enjoy this kind of story. Ready? Let's begin." The rain battered against the windows of the Wellington mansion as Thomas parked his Lamborghini in the garage. It was only 8 in the evening, but for him, who usually arrived after midnight, it was practically mid-afternoon. The meeting in Tokyo had been cancelled at the last minute. Something about urgent family matters from the Asian CEO. Thomas huffed in annoyance. Family matters had always been a pathetic excuse for him. He climbed the main entrance stairs, adjusting his $3,000 Italian tie. His footsteps echoed in the imported marble hall, each sound amplified by the silence that always dominated that house. 45 years old, a fortune that grew while he slept, and not a soul alive to share anything with. Exactly how he liked it, or at least that's what he told himself every night. Opening the door, he expected to find the house plunged into its usual darkness. Sarah always finished her work before he arrived. 15 years working there, and he barely knew the woman's last name. He paid well, she did the job, end of story. Relationships complicated everything, and Thomas had learned early on that money solved any human problem. But the light was on in the living room. Low voices came from the direction of the office. Thomas frowned. Burglars? Impossible. The security system had cost a fortune. Maybe Sarah had forgotten to turn off the television. Typical of the working class, always wasting other people's resources. He walked silently down the hallway, each step calculated. Decades of building a business empire had sharpened his instincts. Always observe before acting, always maintain the advantage, always assume people will disappoint you. The voices grew clearer as he approached. One of them was definitely Sarah's, but there was something different. The tone was authoritative, professional. Thomas stopped near the half-open office door, curious despite himself. In 15 years, he had never heard his housekeeper speak more than 2 sentences in a row. "Blood pressure is dropping rapidly. We need to act now." Sarah's voice cut through the air with a precision that surprised him. She was speaking English, but with an accent he had never noticed. "Dr. Lee, do you have experience with emergency chest tube insertion?" Thomas moved closer to the door. What the hell was going on? Was Sarah watching some ridiculously loud medical show? But there was no sound of a television, just real, urgent human voices. "No, Dr. Miller, I've never performed that procedure," a male voice responded, laden with nervousness and an Asian accent. "I only have 2 years of residency." "Dr. Miller," Thomas almost guffawed, his cleaning lady pretending to be a doctor in some idiotic online game. The absurdity of the situation almost made him turn his back and go to his room. But something in the urgency of the voices kept him there. "Listen carefully, doctor. We have no choice. The girl is only 8 years old and is bleeding internally. The nearest hospital is 6 hours away." Sarah's voice now carried an authority that made Thomas's hair stand on end. "You are going to save her life today. I will guide you step by step." Thomas's heart raced. This wasn't a game. The voices were too real, the urgency too palpable. He pushed the door open slightly and peeked into the office. Sarah was sitting in front of the computer, but it wasn't the Sarah he knew. Her hair was pulled back in a professional bun. She wore glasses he had never seen, and her hands moved with surgical precision over the keyboard. On the screen, he saw a young Asian doctor in what looked like an improvised medical tent. In the background, Thomas could hear shouts and commotion. Blood stained the young man's scrubs, and his eyes showed the panic of someone about to lose a life. "Doctor, I can't stop the abdominal bleeding. My hands are shaking." The young doctor was almost crying. Thomas held his breath. This was real, completely real. Sarah adjusted her glasses and leaned closer to the screen. Her posture had completely transformed. Her shoulders, previously always hunched from the weight of years cleaning other people's homes, were now upright with the confidence of someone who had faced life or death situations thousands of times. "Dr. Lee, take a deep breath. You can do this." Her voice was firm, yet caring. "I've saved hundreds of lives with doctors in training like you. The girl will be fine, but I need you to trust me." Thomas watched, paralyzed, from the crack in the door. The woman he saw every day scrubbing his marble floors was operating remotely, coordinating surgery from the other side of the world. This was impossible. People like Sarah weren't doctors. People like Sarah cleaned houses for a living. First, let's control the bleeding. Locate the source of the hemorrhage. Use your fingers to apply direct pressure while I explain the next step. Sarah spoke with impressive calm, as if giving instructions for folding laundry, not for saving a dying child. The young doctor followed the instructions, his hands still trembling slightly. "I found it. It's a deep laceration of the splenic artery." "Perfect. Now you're going to perform a temporary suture to buy us time." Sarah began drawing diagrams on a tablet next to the computer. "I'm sending the images to your screen now." Thomas saw complex anatomical diagrams appear on the doctor's screen. They weren't simple drawings. They were professional, detailed medical illustrations, with notes in 3 different languages. His housekeeper had created that. Impossible. "Dr. Miller, my hands have stopped shaking. I'm able to visualize better." The relief in the young doctor's voice was palpable. "Excellent. That happens when you trust knowledge and experience. You studied for this, doctor. Your brain knows what to do." Sarah smiled at the screen, and Thomas noticed something he had never seen before, genuine kindness in her eyes. "Now, let's do the suture. Firm, yet delicate movements." For several minutes, Thomas watched hypnotized as Sarah guided the doctor through each stitch of the suture. She knew every muscle, every blood vessel, every possible complication. She spoke like someone who had done this thousands of times. "Blood pressure is stabilizing." Dr. Lee's voice exploded in relief. "She's responding. Excellent work, doctor. You just saved a life." Sarah leaned back in her chair, and for the first time Thomas saw tears in her eyes. The girl will live to see her parents again. Thomas felt something strange stirring in his chest, a sensation he couldn't name. When was the last time he had contributed to saving someone? When was the last time his actions had resulted in anything beyond numbers growing in bank accounts? "Doctor, how can I thank you? You saved the daughter of a refugee who can't even pay for medical treatment." The young doctor was clearly emotional. "Without you, I would have lost my first patient." "The gratitude isn't for me, doctor. It's for you, who had the courage to try when it seemed impossible." Sarah began closing the diagrams on the screen. "And remember, medicine isn't about money. It's about humanity. Never forget that." Thomas swallowed hard. Medicine isn't about money. When was the last time he had done something not motivated by profit? "I need to disconnect now, but Dr. Lee, you have my number. If you need help with complex cases in the coming months, don't hesitate to call. I'll be here." Sarah smiled again. "And congratulations. You've officially become the doctor you always dreamed of being." The connection ended, and Sarah rose from her chair. It was only then that Thomas realized how tense he had been throughout the entire operation. His hands were sweating, his heart still racing, and he didn't even know the child who had been saved. Sarah began putting away the medical equipment that Thomas only now noticed scattered across the table. A professional stethoscope, sterilized surgical instruments, medical books in various languages. How had all these things gotten there? It was then that she turned and saw him standing in the doorway. Sarah's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before narrowing with determination. Thomas had never seen that expression on her face. It was as if she had just quickly calculated all her options and chosen the bravest one. "Mr. Wellington," her voice maintained the same authority she had used with Dr. Lee, "I wasn't expecting you home so early." Thomas opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. 1,000 questions swirled in his mind. Who was this woman? How did a housekeeper know how to perform remote surgeries? Why was she using his office as what, exactly? I heard. Thomas finally managed to articulate a few words, but his voice sounded strange, even to himself. "You were operating on someone." Sarah sighed deeply and began disconnecting the medical equipment with precise, careful movements. "Guiding an emergency surgery. Dr. Lee is a newly qualified doctor working in a refugee camp in Cambodia. They have no resources or specialists available. But you're..." Thomas paused, realizing how his next words would sound. "You're my housekeeper." During the day, yes. Sarah didn't seem offended. In fact, there was a quiet dignity in her response that surprised him. "At night, I go back to being who I've always been." Thomas stepped fully into the office, his eyes scanning the medical equipment, the books, the framed certificates he had never noticed before. How had he missed all of this? "Who have you always been?" Sarah finished putting away the surgical instruments in a professional case and turned to face him. Dr. Sarah Elena Miller, former chief of cardiovascular surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. Specialization in thoracic surgery from Johns Hopkins. 22 years saving lives. The words hit Thomas like a punch to the gut. His housekeeper was a doctor, a cardiovascular surgeon, one of the most complex and respected specialties in medicine. That's impossible. Why would it be impossible? Sarah crossed her arms, and Thomas noticed that her hands, which he had always seen holding cleaning products, bore the delicate scars of someone who had spent decades handling scalpels. Because people like me can't be doctors. Because someone who cleans your house couldn't have studied at Harvard. No, I didn't mean... Thomas struggled to form coherent thoughts. If you're a doctor, why are you working as a housekeeper? Sarah's face closed slightly. Because sometimes life forces us to make choices we never imagined. She walked to the window, looking at the rain that continued to fall. 15 years ago, I had to choose between my career and my family. I chose family. Thomas waited for her to continue, but the silence stretched between them. For the first time in 15 years, he truly looked at Sarah, truly saw her. The steady hands, the confident posture when she wasn't pretending to be invisible, the obvious intelligence in her eyes that he had ignored for so long. But you still practice medicine, he said finally. 4 nights a week, I coordinate emergency surgeries in war zones, refugee camps, and underserved areas around the world. Sarah turned to him. I work with an international organization that connects experienced doctors with professionals in training in critical situations. We save about 200 lives a month. 200 lives a month. Thomas juggled numbers all day, but that figure left him breathless. In 1 month, his housekeeper saved more lives than he had positively impacted in his entire existence. And you do this for free? The question slipped out before he could control himself. Sarah smiled for the first time since he had entered the office. Some things are more valuable than money, Mr. Wellington. I thought someone in your position would understand that. The irony of the statement was not lost on Thomas. Someone in his position. He had built an empire based on the premise that everything had a price, that every action should generate profit. And there was his lowest paid employee, saving lives for free every night. Thomas walked to one of the office armchairs and sat down heavily. The Italian leather that had cost over $10,000 had never seemed so uncomfortable. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Sarah continued organizing her medical equipment, each movement deliberate and efficient. "When would have been the appropriate time, Mr. Wellington? During the 15 years when you barely looked in my direction, or perhaps while I was scrubbing your marble bathrooms?" The answer hurt more than Thomas expected. I always treated you with respect. You treated me like furniture." The statement was made without anger, just as a fact. Politely, but as if I were part of the decor. "In 15 years, you never asked about my family, my dreams, or even my full last name." Thomas opened his mouth to protest, but closed it again. She was right. He knew the names of his lawyers, accountants, rideshare drivers he used regularly. But Sarah, the woman who had cared for his house for 15 years, he only knew she arrived on Monday and left on Friday, that she did an excellent job, and that she never caused problems. "Why do you keep working here?" The question came out in a whisper. "You obviously don't need the money." "A cardiovascular surgeon." "Oh, but I do." Sarah closed the medical case and sat in the chair opposite him. "Volunteer medicine doesn't pay the bills, and I have responsibilities." "What kind of responsibilities?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, her eyes assessing Thomas, as if deciding whether he deserved to know the truth. "My son has cerebral palsy. He needs special care, physical therapy, medical equipment. My daughter is in her second year of medical school at UCLA. My mother has Alzheimer's and needs a full-time caregiver." Each word was like a puzzle piece fitting together, forming an image Thomas had never even imagined. "You support an entire family." "3 families, actually. I also help my sister, who is a widow, with her 2 children." Sarah smiled sadly. "The money you pay for cleaning funds the education of 4 children and the care of 2 elderly people. Every dollar counts." Thomas felt something breaking inside his chest. For years he had prided himself on paying Sarah generously, or at least that's what he told himself. Now he realized that the amount he paid her weekly was equivalent to what he spent on a single meal at his favorite restaurants. "Why did you leave medicine?" Thomas asked, although part of him already suspected the answer. Sarah looked out the window again, and Thomas saw years of pain reflected in her profile. "My husband died in a car accident when my son was 2 years old. The doctor said the cerebral palsy was caused by lack of oxygen during the rescue." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I was at the hospital operating when it happened. I saved 3 lives that night, but I couldn't save my own family." The silence that followed was heavy. Thomas tried to imagine the pain of losing everything while saving strangers, but his mind couldn't process such emotional complexity. "After the accident, I couldn't operate in person anymore. Every patient on the table reminded me of my son struggling to breathe while I was saving others." Sarah discreetly wiped away a tear. "But I discovered I could help remotely, guide other doctors, share knowledge, still save lives without directly facing the traumas." Thomas realized he was holding his breath. "And you've been doing this for 15 years?" "Every night I'm not too exhausted." Sarah stood up and began stacking the medical books. "Dr. Lee was my 30th patient this month. Before him, I guided an emergency C-section in Syria and heart surgery in Haiti. 30th patient this month." Thomas did the math mentally. In 15 years of nightly volunteer work, how many lives had Sarah touched? Thousands, tens of thousands. And there he was, proud of his financial achievements, while the woman who cleaned his house changed the world one surgery at a time. Thomas stood from the armchair, his legs trembling slightly. He walked to the bookshelf where Sarah had organized the medical books. He pulled one down, Advanced Techniques in Cardiovascular Surgery, and saw notes in the margins in 3 different languages. The handwriting was delicate, yet precise. Notes from someone who truly understood every technical word. "How many languages do you speak?" The question came out as he flipped through the book, seeing complex diagrams drawn freehand with impressive precision. 6 fluently, Mandarin, English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and Portuguese, obviously. Sarah replied as she organized some papers. I learned out of necessity. Medical emergencies don't wait for translators. Thomas closed the book and turned to face her. All these years, while I thought I was giving a simple woman an opportunity, you were saving the world. Not saving the world, just doing my part. Sarah stopped organizing the papers and looked directly at him. Just as you do your part by building companies and creating jobs. The generosity of the comparison hit him like a slap. It's not the same thing. No. Don't your companies offer jobs to thousands of people? Don't they help families earn a living? Sarah crossed her arms. Just because you profit from it doesn't make it any less valuable. Thomas shook his head. But I never saved a life. How are you sure of that? Sarah approached him. How many employees do your companies employ? How many families depend on the salaries you pay? How many small suppliers grew by providing for your companies? Thomas had never thought of it that way. To him, business was just numbers, strategies, results. He had never connected his business decisions with real human faces. But it's different, he insisted. You literally save lives. I just move money. Money that feeds families. Money that pays for children's education. Money that allows people like me to have stability, to do volunteer work. Sarah smiled for the first time with genuine warmth. Do you think I could spend my nights saving lives if I didn't have the security of this job? The observation left him speechless. He had never thought that his work could indirectly be connected to the surgeries Sarah performed remotely. Why are you being so kind to me? Thomas finally asked. I was terrible to you all these years. I treated you like furniture. Sarah completed without bitterness. Because you didn't know how to do differently. No one taught you that wealth isn't about having more than others, but about using what you have to make the world better. Thomas walked to the window, watching the rain begin to subside. My parents taught me that people were either competitors or resources, that trusting someone was weakness, that showing vulnerability was an invitation to be exploited. And did that work for you? Sarah asked gently. Did that philosophy bring you happiness? Thomas laughed bitterly. It brought money, a lot of money. But did it bring happiness? Sarah insisted. Thomas didn't answer because he couldn't lie. 45 years old, an incalculable fortune, and he couldn't remember the last time he had felt genuinely happy or genuinely connected to another human being. When was the last time you woke up excited for the day ahead? Sarah continued. When was the last time you did something just because it was the right thing to do? The questions hurt because they forced Thomas to confront truths he had buried for decades. He had built walls so high around his life that he had forgotten what it felt like to feel anything beyond ambition and distrust. Can I ask a question? Thomas turned to Sarah. Why did you never give up on me? 15 years of cold treatment, and you kept doing an impeccable job. Why? Sarah smiled, and for the first time, Thomas saw in that smile the same compassion she had shown Dr. Lee during the surgery. Because I saw something in you that perhaps you don't even see yourself. Sarah walked to the desk and picked up a photo Thomas had never noticed before. It was an old, faded image of a younger woman in a white lab coat surrounded by a medical team, all smiling after what had clearly been a successful surgery. This photo was taken 3 days before the accident that changed my life. She showed the image to Thomas. I was arrogant, focused solely on my career, convinced that my success made me superior to other people. Thomas studied the photo. The Sarah in the image radiated confidence and ambition. Her eyes had the same intensity he recognized in himself during the early years of building his empire. I was exactly like you, Sarah continued. I thought people were divided into competitors and resources. That vulnerability was weakness. That measuring my worth by my successes made me special. What changed? Losing everything taught me that true wealth isn't measured in achievements or bank accounts. Sarah carefully put the photo away. It's measured in how many lives you positively touch, in how many people become better because they crossed your path. Thomas sat down again, the weight of Sarah's words settling in his mind. But you lost your career, your husband. How did that not make you bitter? It did, for a while. Sarah sat opposite him. I spent 2 years blaming the world, blaming God, blaming myself. It was my son who pulled me out of that darkness. Your son? One day, when he was 4, he saw me crying at the hospital during one of his physical therapy sessions. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she continued. He crawled over to me, he couldn't walk yet, and said, "Mommy, can you fix broken people like me?" Thomas felt a lump form in his throat. That's when I realized I had lost my purpose, not my ability to help. That I could use my pain to understand the pain of others, that my scars could become bridges to reach people who were also suffering. Sarah discreetly wiped away tears, including a lonely billionaire who had forgotten how to connect with other human beings. You saw me as a charity project, Thomas asked, unable to decide whether to feel insulted or touched. I saw someone who was just as wounded as I was, but wearing different masks. Sarah leaned forward. Do you think I don't recognize loneliness when I see it? Do you think I don't know what it's like to build walls to protect yourself from pain? Thomas looked at his hands, trying to process what he was hearing. But you had family to protect. I only have money. You have much more than that. Sarah stood up and walked to a shelf, retrieving a yellowed envelope. May I show you something? Thomas nodded, curious. Sarah opened the envelope and pulled out several newspaper clippings. All of them talked about his companies, but they weren't financial articles. They were stories about employees promoted, communities revitalized by his factories, scholarships offered by his foundations. Did you know that Marcus, the doorman at your corporate building, was able to pay for his father's heart surgery with your company's health plan? Sarah showed one of the clippings. Or that Brenda, from the office cleaning staff, was able to send her daughter to college with the scholarship program you created. Thomas frowned. I didn't create any scholarship program. Yes, you did, 8 years ago, when your accountant suggested a tax deduction through educational investments. You signed without even reading it. Sarah smiled. That deduction became a foundation that has since funded the education of 300 low-income children. Thomas tried to remember the paperwork, but there were so many documents he signed daily. I didn't know that. That your decisions affected real lives, that your success created opportunities for other people, that even acting for financial motives, you were changing the world. Sarah organized the clippings again. You have the power to transform thousands of lives, Thomas. The question is, what will you do with that power now that you know this? Thomas remained silent for several minutes, processing everything he had discovered. His housekeeper was a renowned surgeon. His business decisions had impacted hundreds of lives without him knowing. And the woman he had treated like furniture for 15 years had seen potential in him when he himself couldn't. Sarah, he said finally, his voice coming out weaker than he intended. May I ask something very personal? She nodded, putting the clippings back into the envelope. Why did you really stay working here? The complete truth. Sarah sighed and walked to the window. The rain had stopped and the first stars were beginning to appear in the night sky. Because I believed that one day you would ask exactly that. She turned to face him. Because I saw a man who had built walls so high that he couldn't even see over them anymore. And because I recognized in them the same walls I built after losing my husband. You stayed here because of me? I stayed here because I believe lost people can be found, because I believe closed hearts can open again, and because, she paused, choosing her words carefully, because someone needed to believe in you until you learned to believe in yourself. Thomas felt tears burning his eyes for the first time in decades. I wasted 15 years of your life. You gave me 15 years of purpose. Sarah approached and hesitantly touched his shoulder. Taking care of this house gave me stability to care for my family and save lives at night. But more than that, it gave me hope that one day you would awaken to the person you truly are. And what person is that? Thomas asked, genuinely curious about the answer. Someone who cares deeply, but forgot how to show it. Someone who has a massive heart, but built a fortress around it. Someone who wants to make a difference in the world, but was taught that vulnerability is dangerous. Thomas stood up and walked to the phone on the desk. May I make a call? Sarah nodded, intrigued. Thomas dialed a number from memory. David, it's Thomas. I know it's late, but I need to talk about the Educational Foundation. Yes, the one we set up for a tax deduction 8 years ago. I want to know exactly how it works and how I can expand the program. First thing tomorrow. Perfect. He hung up and turned to Sarah, who was watching him with a growing smile. David is my lead accountant, Thomas explained. Apparently, I have a foundation that helps low-income children, and I have no idea how it operates. It's a start, Sarah said gently. Sarah, may I ask another question? Of course. That medical equipment, this whole operation you set up here at night, how much does it cost to keep everything running? Sarah hesitated. Why do you want to know? Because I'm trying to understand how you manage to finance professional medical equipment, high-quality international connections, and all these resources on a housekeeper's salary. I sell a few things sometimes, antique furniture I inherited, my grandmother's jewelry. Sarah lowered her eyes. And I pick up some extra shifts cleaning offices on weekends. Thomas felt as if he had been punched in the gut. You work 7 days a week. Not every weekend, only when new equipment is needed or when there's a family emergency. Good heavens, Sarah. Thomas ran his hands through his hair. You're killing yourself to save other people. It's not that dramatic. Oh, it is exactly that dramatic, Thomas interrupted, his voice rising for the first time in their conversation. You work 7 days a week, support 3 families, save lives for free every night, and on top of that, you sell your own belongings to buy medical equipment. Sarah didn't answer, but Thomas saw the exhaustion in her eyes for the first time. How had he missed that all these years? How much? He asked suddenly. How much what? How much do you need to set up a